Hello, my name is Sterling Johnson. I'm a friend of Stefanie Atkinson, who I consider to be a brilliant person. Uh, she asked if I could show you some things. I'm the bubble smith. I do bubbles professionally as entertainment. And she thought it might be useful if I talk to you a little bit today about some common questions I get, show you a few things that I've done, and I'm basically going to be playing here, and we'll see what comes out of this and see if this is useful for you. Maybe it will inspire something for you. If not, maybe it will just be a nice diversion and you can enjoy the entertainment. But my hope, I believe that deep within what bubbles are and how they react is a lot to be observed that helps you understand the world. And so I'd love to try and do that. And I'd like to do that on a simple level for kids, but on a more sophisticated level for adults. So let's see what happens. I did a science project in high school on soap films. It wasn't a very good science project, but I discovered that if I could get my hands soapy, I could actually blow bubbles just using my hands, which struck me as one of the most wonderful things I'd ever learned. I still think so. I discovered that I could make bubbles with one hand, like that. I could make bubbles with two hands, like that. I could also make bubbles with two hands, like that, or like that. And to me, it's always been a delight to be able to do that. People seem surprised you can do it. I think it's just, there's something very special about having a bubble in your hands. There's something almost intimate about being in direct contact with the bubble. Let's talk a little bit about what bubbles are. It's soap and water and air, but I guess Bucky Fuller would say it's a tensegrity structure. It's a lot of molecules and ions in solution in a very, very thin film that are all holding together, and the surface tension on the outside exactly balances the pressure on the inside. If the pressure were too large on the inside, if I add more pressure on the inside, it'll cause the bubble to expand out. If I take pressure away, oh, not like that. Let me see if I can do it differently. If I take pressure away by opening a hole, it closes itself right up. See if I can get a bigger one, show you that again. And if something's inside, like another bubble, no. Opening the hole, oh. Opening the hole gives it a chance for the stuff to escape. So kids often ask me, I'll try and answer the questions I get mostly. What causes bubbles to pop? And the simplest thing is anything dry that touches the bubble will cause it to pop. If something's wet, like my finger, I can stick my finger right in. You can see that, right? If my elbow is dry, and so it'll pop it. So I'll show you one of my favorite tricks. This is called the invisible bubble trick. Inside that bubble, there's an invisible bubble. Can you see it? No, because it's invisible. But I can make it visible if I can reach my hand up inside, grab a hold, and pull it out. So here goes. Just over my fingertips, and got it. And there's the bubble. Now, I think if you take one out, you ought to put one back. It only seems fair. So, a concept. If something is soapy, it can go right through the surface. If it's dry, it'll pop the surface. So I can stick a finger in. I can stick a hand in. If we got a big enough bubble and I took off my shirt, I got my whole arm soapy, I could put my whole arm inside. So using your imagination now, if you had a big enough bubble, incidentally, my camera once in a while gets me really fuzzy. Sorry about that. And sometimes that'll correct it. Good. If you had a big enough bubble and you got me entirely soapy, bathing cap, bathing suit, nothing else on, doused with detergent, I could walk right through a bubble. And I did that at the Exploratorium for their bubble festivals back in the 80s. It was a very strange circumstance, and I haven't attempted to do it again. Haven't wanted to, actually. So bubbles are minimum surface objects. That means they always try and find the smallest surface to contain the gas that's inside of them. And you can see that the minimum surface is generally a sphere. When these are really little, they are almost perfect spheres. As they get bigger, gravity and distortions from the air keep them from being round. But the little ones get real close. If you put two bubbles together, they will find the minimum surface to make that happen, and that's what it looks like. Mathematicians worry about how to make the calculation, and it's tough calculus. The bubbles don't have any trouble with it at all. They just make the surface. It's the original analog computer, okay? And see if I can get another one in the chain. We go. And the bubble inside the bubble is my favorite trick. So let me see if I can add one each one. Oh, no. Okay. Let me show you another of my favorite tricks. You've seen a bubble inside a bubble. That's an outer surface, and then there's another one inside free floating. And the question is, can you get one on the inside of that? And there are some ways to do it, but I found, this is my favorite. So there's a bubble inside a bubble. Hope you can see that. And let me now add the inside one if I can. And there it is. Oh, and it pops out. See what else I can show you. There's a lot of nice things with hoops. And if you're interested in blowing bubbles, you need a couple of conditions. One is you need a good bubble solution. I'm working with Uncle Bubbles. It's a commercial product, works quite well, and is predictable. If I work outdoors, I use too much of the stuff, and it's too expensive. So I mix up my own with Dawn and water and a little bit of some long-chain polymers, polyethylene oxide and methyl cellulose. If you're doing this at home, a decent formula, a gallon of warm water, 3/4 of a cup of Dawn, and a 3-ounce container of KY jelly. Yes, that KY jelly. Let's see what's happening here. Okay, just lost my picture, so I'm back. So let me, and once again, a little fuzzy. Okay, picking me up. Good. So this hoop is made from some wire covered over with a little bit of some cotton cloth stuffed into some tubes to give me control over it. And see, it does a nice job. You know, I think that part of what happens with my camera is that it doesn't know quite where to focus. Should it focus on the bubble on the front of the bubble, the back of the bubble, me back here? And that's why I get a little blurry in the picture. Sorry about that. One of the things I love doing is putting kids inside bubbles. I can't do that with you right here, but I'll give you some of the experience of what it's like to have the bubble coming to you and surrounding you. Try that one more time. And here comes the bubble and surround. Okay. How to clean off your camera, right? I've been playing a lot with what happens when you make separations, and you get some pretty interesting structures. The bubbles trying to find a minimum surface as they grow out. You can see they choose interesting shapes. Another way to do that, I love using things for purposes they weren't designed for. So here's a piece of tube that I think is about 3 inches across. I think so, with a little bit of segmented on the end. Show you what this does. One of the things about having a camera rather than being live is the camera gets real confused as to how close things are. You lose perspective. And so here's a bubble that's maybe 3 inches across, but we get it right up to you. Looks like it's the whole world, which is kind of cool. Let's see what else I have for you. Common questions. How big can bubbles be? We don't know the answer to that. In fact, there were some efforts by physicists to figure out if you had a tube of bubble, how long could it be? And they came to a nice calculation which has nothing to do with reality. The longest tube of bubble, you might have noticed if I start out with a hoop and I move it forward, it wants to make a long tube, and world's record of bubbles outside were done with equipment sort of like this, but scaled up much bigger. This is just some fabric in a loop on a couple of poles. Let's see what I can get for you here. And you can see it makes a pretty good sized bubble. So that one was probably 3 or 4 feet in diameter. That's not a bad sized bubble, all things considered. I've had some outdoors with equipment like that were probably 8 to 10 feet in diameter. That's outside of the frame of this picture. Not a world's record. I know the guy who has the world's record. He's in Cleveland, and his bubble would probably, if it were totally spherical, would probably be about 15 feet in diameter. And that's a huge bubble. That is vastly bigger than a 10-foot bubble. It's not just, it's not just a third bigger, because it's a third bigger and a third bigger and a third bigger. And when you start doing that, it gets way big and very hard to make. The longest tube of bubble anybody has made, as far as I know, is probably 105 feet long. Guy did it a long time ago. I used to have a picture of it. And in the picture, the guy, it's a little guy with this bubble that goes all the way out here. Very impressive to watch. And because people aren't used to them, I think they get really excited by the idea that bubbles can do this sort of thing. In my mind, what bubbles show you, if you set them up in the right way, is a little piece of how the world works that we don't normally see. And when you find an experiment or a situation that shows you that, in my mind, that's golden. The Exploratorium in San Francisco does a wonderful job of that, of people designing a way to make something happen that strips away all the excess stuff that you don't need. Sorry about that fuzziness again. There I am. It strips away all the excess that gets in the way of you seeing the real effect. And bubbles sort of do that as well. Let's see what else I've got. That's just a normal string with some good bubble solution on it. Been playing a little bit with what happens if you take a couple of hoops and run them in parallel. I think a lot of the world is kind of like a dance, the way things work, and I love being able to imitate that with bubbles. All right. Let's see what else I can do for you. Other common questions. How long have I been doing this is the usual question. I got started in high school when John Kennedy was the president. There's a test to see if you could figure that out. Let's see. Kind of a nice thing to notice, if you take one of these that a lot of kids use to make bubbles and take a straw, you can make a lot of bubbles. Just a nice combination. It doesn't take sophisticated stuff. One of the things I do, this whole table, you can probably see a little bit. I'm fuzzy again. Come on back. Okay, there I am. This, in some of my shows, I did a show today from in here. And this is part of a sequence where I try to make bubbles 30 different ways in 3 minutes. And so I use things like a pair of scissors. Works just fine. A colander to strain things. Even an egg carton, if you punch some holes in it, will make bubbles pretty well. What else do I want to show you? I'm constantly playing to see what happens, and I had some plastic, I think vinyl, square tubing. You can see the cross section here, and I decided to cut it into sections that are about 2 inches long and bolted them all together and put a handle on it just to see what would happen. Just did this last night. So this is sort of an experiment. See what happens. And it tends to make a chain of bubbles, but they quickly rearrange themselves to a more minimum surface. Now it's a little hard to show, and I'm losing picture. Let me Bring you back up again. Okay. And is there anything else? Let me try, just for instance, to see what happens. So this is just a sheet of flat plastic. Uses kind of a work surface. Give it a moment. Can you see the colors in it? You should be able to see some stripes that are moving across here. What's happening is the bubble is very thin. It's down at the wavelength of light. Light comes from the room, hits the surface, bounces to your eye, goes through the film, hits the back surface, and is reflected out to your eye. And because light is waves, the wave from the front and a wave from the back interfere with each other. For a particular thickness, which represents a color, the waves are in sync, and what happens when it's in sync is our eye sees it as brighter, and that's the color we see. You may be able to see a little bit of some of the drainage going on. What you see will be patterns that see if I can show some of that to you. My fingers are putting more liquid on, and so you might see some patterns where it's draining down below where my fingers are. Looks like that's the place to hold it to see it. And eventually the thing becomes thin. Gravity pulls the liquid down, it thins at the top, and typically that's where it's going to pop from. One of the things bubbles do, because you have this tension on the bubble, if you put a force on something, it will create a wave that goes out. And so if I tap it, the wave, in fact, if I give it a little tap, the wave will go over here and it should come back. So let's see. There it is. Over and back, over and back. And you can set up, if you're just a little clever, you can set up a standing wave pattern. And if you have slow motion, you get big waves. And if you do it quickly, it produces little teeny waves. All right. And let's see if there's anything else I'd like to show you. One of my favorite things is what happens if you take a highly segmented surface like this. I don't know how many openings there are there, and dip it in. It will naturally make a big mass of big bubbled foam. What else it'll do, if you use a fan, just a simple sheet of plastic pulling away from it, it will create a kind of bubble snowstorm. Whew. My landlord is someday going to come in and see stains on the ceiling and wonder how I got them there. It hasn't happened yet. So I think that's all I wanted to show you. I appreciate your attention. I know the project that Stefanie is working on is wonderfully amorphous, and I hope that some of what I've done here has been entertaining and helpful, and perhaps If you are interested in learning more, there's a lot of stuff online you can go to. You can also go and visit my website, sterlingthebubblesmith.com. And if you'd like to send me an email, I'd be happy to respond back. Thanks.